I never thought I'd end up at war over a simple wooden sign. But that's exactly how it started, one hot, humid Saturday morning in late June, when the cicadas screamed from the trees and the air smelled like fresh-cut grass and engine oil. I had just finished mowing the front yard of my new property, 2 acres of freedom on the edge of a sleepy suburban neighborhood, when I hammered a board into the ground that read, in bold black paint, "Not in HOA." It wasn't meant to provoke anyone. It was meant to remind myself that for the first time in my adult life, I didn't owe anyone permission to live the way I wanted. After years of renting under ridiculous rules, of getting letters about unsightly trash bins, or non-approved paint colors, I had finally escaped that nonsense. This land was mine, free and clear, right outside the HOA boundary line. But apparently, freedom doesn't sit well with everyone. It started about an hour later. I was in the garage, wiping the sweat off my neck and tuning up my old Harley, when I heard the high-pitched screech of brakes out front. I looked up through the open garage door and saw a silver Lexus SUV parked half on the street, half on my gravel drive. A woman in a starched white blouse and oversized sunglasses was standing next to it, arms crossed, staring at my sign like I'd just cursed her ancestors. You could feel the disapproval radiating off her like heat off asphalt. She finally shouted, "Excuse me, sir." I sighed, set down my wrench, and walked toward her, already guessing who she was before she even spoke. "Can I help you?" I asked. She gestured toward the sign. "What exactly is that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said calmly, "that I'm not in your HOA." Her jaw clenched. "Well, that's impossible. This entire area is governed by the Lakeview Homeowners Association. Every property from the corner lot to the oak tree line is under our covenant." "Ma'am," I said, pointing toward the tree line, "everything past those trees, including my place, is outside your boundary. I double-checked with the county before I bought. You've got nothing to worry about." She scoffed. "I'm the HOA president. I think I know where our lines are." There it was. The HOA Karen reveal. I kept my voice calm, though my blood was starting to boil. "Well, president or not, you're standing on my private property right now. And that sign stays." Her lips twisted into a smirk. "We'll see about that." Then she snapped a photo of my sign with her phone, got back into her SUV, and drove off, tires crunching like she wanted me to hear every pebble. I figured that was the end of it. But with people like her, it's never that simple. That night, I was grilling steaks out back with a cold beer in hand, watching the sun melt into the trees. My dog, Max, was chasing fireflies, and everything felt peaceful, until I noticed a pair of headlights creeping down my driveway. It was the same silver Lexus. I sighed. "You've got to be kidding me." I set down my plate and walked toward the front yard. This time, she wasn't alone. Another car followed her, a black sedan with flashing hazard lights. A man stepped out wearing a polo shirt tucked too tightly into khaki shorts, clipboard in hand. HOA muscle, I guessed. "Evening," I said, trying to sound civil. The woman stepped forward, pointing her manicured finger at me. "You've been warned once already," she snapped. "That sign violates the community's image standards. It needs to come down tonight." I laughed, probably not the best idea, but I couldn't help it. "Lady, I don't live under your image standards. I don't pay your dues. This land isn't yours." The guy with the clipboard cleared his throat. "Sir, per Article 9, Section 4, all external signage must be pre-approved by the association board." I folded my arms. "Then maybe you should read your Article 10, the one that defines your jurisdiction. I'm not inside it. You can check the county plat map yourself." They exchanged glances. Karen's face twisted into that tight, fake smile people wear when they know they're losing control. "You'll regret this," she said, and they stormed off. Max barked after them as they drove away. I scratched his head and muttered, "Good boy." Some people just can't stand minding their own business. By the next morning, things escalated. When I stepped outside to grab the paper, I noticed tire marks on my gravel path, fresh ones, and something weird near the signpost. The board was splintered. My "Not in HOA" sign was lying flat on the ground, broken clean through. I felt my jaw tighten. I wasn't some passive pushover. My father had taught me that respect goes both ways, and when people can't give it, they need to earn your boundaries the hard way. So I rebuilt it. Bigger. Stronger. This time, I used a 4x4 post sunk in concrete, painted the letters thicker, and added a line underneath, "Trespassers will be reported." Then I installed a small motion camera facing the road, just in case. By noon, I could see the silver Lexus creeping by again, slower this time. She didn't stop, but I saw her phone raised through the window. Taking pictures. Again. I smiled and waved. That afternoon, while I was fixing up my shed, a county sheriff's cruiser rolled into my driveway. My stomach dropped, not because I'd done anything wrong, but because I already knew who had called. The deputy, a young guy in mirrored shades, stepped out and said, "Afternoon, sir. We got a report of a trespasser refusing to leave HOA property." I almost laughed. "Let me guess, silver Lexus." He smirked. "You know her?" "Unfortunately." He looked around, checked the address on his tablet, then frowned. "This property isn't even listed in the HOA zone." "Exactly," I said. "She just doesn't like my sign reminding her of it." The officer chuckled, shaking his head. "These HOA disputes are wild, man. Don't worry, I'll talk to her." I thanked him, but the damage was done. The neighbors were starting to notice. I saw blinds twitching, phones recording. Word spreads fast in quiet neighborhoods, especially when there's drama involved. By sunset, my so-called peaceful weekend had turned into a community circus. One woman walking her dog asked if I was the rebel guy. Another man said he respected me for standing up to Karen. It was like living in a small-town western, where I was the outlaw and she was the self-appointed sheriff. And deep down, I knew it wasn't over, not even close. That night, sitting on my porch with the crickets chirping, I stared at the glowing camera feed on my phone. The sign stood tall in the dark, lit by the porch light. I thought about how absurd it was, grown adults fighting over imaginary borders and authority they didn't have. But to Karen, this wasn't about rules. It was about control. And when people like her lose control, they don't stop, they escalate. And I was ready for whatever came next. Paragraph 2. By Monday morning, I realized I had underestimated just how far Karen was willing to go. When people like her feel threatened, not by violence, but by freedom, they don't retreat, they organize. They gossip. They build little armies of clipboard warriors and whisper networks. I woke up to the faint sound of voices outside my window. At first, I thought it was just neighbors out walking early, but when I looked through the blinds, my jaw tightened. There were 3 of them, Karen, her clipboard sidekick, and another woman wearing a pink tracksuit with a tiny dog on a leash. They were standing right at the edge of my gravel drive, pointing at my house, the camera, and the new sign like it was some kind of neighborhood crime scene. I stepped out onto the porch, coffee mug in hand. "Can I help you folks?" Karen turned, flashing that tight-lipped HOA smile again, the kind that pretends to be polite but drips with contempt. "Good morning. We're just reviewing some boundary issues with the association." "Boundary issues?" I said. "You mean trespassing?" Her friend in the tracksuit huffed. "You don't need to be rude. We're just making sure your property isn't encroaching on community land." "Lady," I said, gesturing toward the line of survey stakes marking my border, "those pink flags right there. They're county survey markers. That's the line. Everything on this side of it, including the gravel, the sign, and this porch, is mine. Karen took a slow sip from her stainless steel tumbler. We'll have to verify that with our attorney. I laughed under my breath. You do that. They eventually left, but not before Karen took another round of photos, the house, the sign, even my license plate. It was clear she wasn't going to stop until she won. That afternoon, I drove into town to run a few errands, picked up some lumber, grabbed a coffee at the diner, and chatted with a few locals. Most of them already knew who I was. Word travels fast around small communities, especially when there's a feud brewing. One guy, an older farmer named Bill, leaned over his coffee cup and said, "You're the one with the, not in HOA, sign, right?" I nodded. He grinned. Good for you. Those people have been running this side of the lake like it's a private kingdom. About time someone pushed back. When I got home later that day, I noticed something new, a laminated notice taped to my mailbox. Notice of violation, unauthorized signage and encroachment on association easement. At the bottom, in bold letters, failure to remove sign may result in legal action. And right beneath that, Karen's signature. I stood there for a long minute, just staring at it. The absurdity almost made me laugh, until I realized she had walked onto my property again to post it. I tore the paper off, took a picture of it, and went inside. Then I printed my own note, laminated it, and nailed it right beneath my sign, "Private property, you are trespassing. HOA has no authority here." I didn't realize it at the time, but that single act, that small bit of defiance, would be what sent her completely over the edge. The next day, it escalated again. Around 10 a.m., while I was working in the garage, I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. I looked up, not another Lexus this time, but a black and white police cruiser. My stomach dropped. The deputy who stepped out wasn't the same one from before. This guy was older, with mirrored shades and a serious look that said he'd already been briefed. "Morning, sir," he said, approaching slowly. "We got a call from the Lakeview HOA. They're claiming you're trespassing on association-owned land and refusing to vacate." I let out a low breath. "You've got to be kidding me." He shook his head slightly. "Mind if I take a look at your deed?" "Not at all." I went inside, grabbed the folder from my filing cabinet, and handed it over. He studied it for a few minutes, flipping through the plat maps and county documents. Then he nodded. "Looks like your property's completely outside their jurisdiction." "I've been saying that since day one," I said. He sighed. "Yeah, well, she didn't mention that part. Look, I'll file the report and make it clear this is a civil matter. But if she keeps calling, you might want to talk to a lawyer, just to protect yourself." I thanked him and watched as he drove off. But instead of relief, what I felt was frustration, the kind that comes from knowing someone's trying to weaponize the system against you. She wasn't just being nosy anymore. She was trying to make me look like the criminal. That evening, as the sun dipped below the tree line, I sat out on the porch with Max at my feet and a cold beer in my hand, thinking about my next move. Part of me wanted to ignore her, let her tire herself out. But another part, the stubborn part, knew that people like her never stop until you force them to. So, I decided to hit her where it hurt, paperwork. The next morning, I went down to the county recorder's office and requested certified copies of every map, easement, and legal description for the entire Lakeview area. The clerk, a cheerful older woman named Denise, handed me a thick stack of papers and said, "Oh, her again? You're not the first one she's gone after." That told me everything I needed to know. I highlighted every line that proved my property was outside the HOA's reach and scanned them into a neat little folder labeled, Karen Defense Kit. By the time I got home, I felt ready for whatever came next. 2 days later, whatever came next, arrived in the form of a full-blown confrontation. It was around noon, and I was out by the dock cleaning my boat, when I heard voices up by the driveway again, louder this time, angrier. When I walked up, I saw Karen standing there with 2 other HOA board members and, unbelievably, the same older police officer from before. "Sir," he said, "we're responding to another complaint." I looked from him to Karen. "What now?" Karen's voice quivered with fake indignation. "He's been posting threatening messages on his sign and harassing residents." I blinked. "You mean this sign?" I pointed to it. "The one that says you're trespassing?" She crossed her arms. "You're intimidating neighbors. We have witnesses who feel unsafe." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Unsafe? Because I'm sitting on my porch with my dog, on my property?" The officer rubbed the back of his neck. "Ma'am, unless he's making direct threats, there's nothing I can do." Karen's voice rose. "He's an aggressive man. He's defacing community property." I stepped forward, calm but firm. "Officer, would you please inform her, again, that this is not HOA land?" He sighed, looked at her, and said, "Ma'am, I checked the county lines myself. He's within his rights." Her face twisted. For a second, I thought she might actually scream. Then, without another word, she turned, marched to her car, and drove off so fast that gravel flew behind her tires. The other HOA board members followed, looking embarrassed. The officer gave me a sympathetic look. "She's persistent. That's one word for it," I said. But I should have known that humiliation wouldn't stop her, it would only make her more dangerous. Over the next week, strange things started happening. Trash cans mysteriously tipped over. My mailbox was stuffed with junk flyers. One night, I heard footsteps near the edge of my property, but when I went out with a flashlight, there was no one there, just the rustling of leaves and the faint echo of laughter from down the road. It was harassment, plain and simple. I sent the security footage to the sheriff's office, and they confirmed at least one incident showed Karen's Lexus parked across the street late at night. That was the final straw. I filed a formal harassment complaint against her. The deputy I spoke to took me seriously this time. "She's been warned before," he said. "If she keeps this up, we'll charge her." For the first time in weeks, I felt like maybe, just maybe, the storm was breaking. But then came the day everything exploded, the day she called the cops and accused me of trespassing on her property. It was a Saturday morning again, hot, bright, the kind of day where you can smell the lake in the air. I decided to take Max for a walk down the trail that borders the HOA neighborhood. It's a public easement path, open to everyone. I had just reached the edge of the HOA's manicured lawns when I heard a voice behind me. "Hey! You don't belong here." I turned. Karen stood a few yards away, phone already raised, recording. "This is private HOA property," she snapped. "You're trespassing." "It's a public trail," I said, pointing to the small wooden sign with the county seal that read Public Access Pathway, maintained by county parks. She ignored it. "I'm calling the police." I sighed, tugged Max's leash. "Go ahead. I'll wait." 5 minutes later, the same sheriff's cruiser pulled up. The deputy stepped out, eyes already tired. "Let me guess," he said. "Trespassing?" Karen jabbed a finger at me. "He's walking his dog on HOA property again. I told you he's a problem." The deputy rubbed his temple. "Ma'am, this is a public easement." She looked like she might combust. "It's within the HOA map." "Your HOA map doesn't override county jurisdiction," he said flatly. For a long moment, she just stood there, shaking with rage. Then she turned, glared at me, and hissed, "You'll regret this. You don't belong here." I met her eyes and said quietly, "Neither do your rules." That night, I sat on my porch again, the sound of crickets buzzing in the trees, the "Not in HOA" sign standing proud in the moonlight. It wasn't just a board anymore. It had become a statement, a line in the sand between freedom and control. I didn't know yet how far Karen would go to erase that line. But I was starting to realize something. She wasn't fighting for the HOA anymore. She was fighting for her pride. And that made her dangerous. Paragraph 3. The Monday after the trespassing incident felt heavier than usual. The air itself seemed charged, like the whole neighborhood was holding its breath. I woke up to the low hum of gossip, lawnmower engines idling longer than they needed to, neighbors suddenly finding reasons to linger by their mailboxes when I stepped outside. Eyes followed me everywhere. By noon, I knew why. A thick white envelope sat in my mailbox, sealed with the HOA's logo like some kind of royal decree. Inside was a notice of legal action and demand for compliance. According to the letter, I was encroaching upon community property, displaying unapproved signage, and creating a hostile environment for residents. The kicker. They were threatening to fine me $250 per day until I removed the sign. I couldn't help but laugh, not out of amusement, but disbelief. They were actually trying to find someone who wasn't even in their HOA. I picked up my phone and called the number listed at the bottom. A receptionist answered, polite but nervous. Lakeview Homeowners Association, this is Paula speaking. Hi, Paula, I said. You might want to tell your boss, Karen, that she's just committed fraud. There was a pause. May I ask who's calling? Yeah, I said evenly, the guy who isn't in your HOA. She didn't respond. I could practically hear the panic through the line before she muttered something about forwarding it to legal counsel and hung up. Fine. If they wanted legal, I'd give them legal. That afternoon, I made an appointment with a property attorney in town, Robert Jensen, a calm, methodical man in his late 50s with silver hair and eyes that didn't miss much. His office walls were lined with old county maps and framed case documents. After I explained everything, the sign, the police calls, the fake violation notices, he leaned back in his chair and said, "You've got them cornered. They're acting outside their authority." He flipped through my deed, nodding. Yep. You're on parcel 87B. HOA boundary stops at 87A. You're free and clear. If they keep sending threats, we'll file for harassment and seek damages. That word, damages, hit different. It meant the fight was no longer about pride. It was about justice. Before I left, Robert handed me a copy of the county's official zoning map and said, "Keep this handy. If she calls the cops again, show them this first." I thanked him, shook his hand, and drove home feeling like I finally had ammunition. That night, I decided to make things official, publicly. I set up a small tripod and filmed a short video on my phone. Nothing dramatic, nothing angry, just me standing by the "Not in HOA" sign with the sunset glowing behind me. "Hi, folks," I began. "My name's Mark Collins. I live right here on county land, not HOA property. But my neighbors across the road can't seem to accept that. They've vandalized my sign, called the police on me, and now they're threatening legal action. So here's the truth, I'm not breaking any law. And this sign, it's staying." I posted it to a local community forum that night. By morning, it had over 1,200 views and a few hundred comments, and the majority were on my side. People from other neighborhoods started sharing their own HOA horror stories. One guy wrote, "Finally someone standing up to these suburban dictators." Another woman commented, "Lakeview HOA's been bullying people for years. About time someone exposed them." Karen must have seen it too, because by noon, my inbox was full of angry emails. Some anonymous, some obviously her, all accusing me of spreading misinformation and defaming the community. I ignored them. But the more I ignored, the louder she got. 2 days later, I woke up to find a private property, no trespassing, HOA members only, sign staked right at the start of the public trail, the same one I'd walked Max on. She was trying to rewrite reality. So, I took pictures, called the county parks department, and sent them proof of the public easement marker. The ranger I spoke with sounded irritated. "She's been warned before about posting unauthorized signs. We'll handle it." And they did, By lunchtime, a county truck pulled up and workers removed Karen's fake sign. I watched from my porch as they peeled it out of the ground and tossed it into the truck bed. It should have ended there. But people like Karen don't let go, they double down. That evening, she showed up again, this time not alone. 3 SUVs pulled up with her, HOA board members, apparently, and they marched right up to my property line like an army in matching polos. Karen pointed at my camera. "He's been filming residents," she shouted. "We demand he take it down." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean the security camera? The one on my property? That's not coming down." She stepped closer, heels crunching the gravel. "You're harassing the community. You can't just point cameras at people." "It's aimed at my driveway," I said. "If you're on camera, it's because you're trespassing." One of the board men muttered, "Karen, maybe we should, quiet," she snapped. "We have rights." I pulled out my phone and started recording. "So do I." They froze when they realized they were on video. The man sighed. "Let's just go." Karen glared at me for a long second, her face tight and trembling, then stormed off. I didn't know it yet, but that video would later become my biggest piece of evidence. The following week brought silence, and for a moment, I thought maybe I'd finally scared her off. But silence from someone like her is never peace, it's plotting. On Thursday morning, I opened my front door to find a certified letter on the mat. Summons and complaint, Lakeview Homeowners Association versus Mark Collins. I stared at it for a long minute, heart thudding. She had actually filed a lawsuit. Inside, the claims were ridiculous: trespassing, defamation, and interference with community operations. It was laughable, but serious, and I knew I had to treat it that way. I drove straight to Robert Jensen's office. When he read through the complaint, his lips pressed into a thin line. "She's out of her mind," he said finally. "But this could work in our favor. Once a judge sees these boundaries, she's done." We filed a countersuit the same day, for harassment, defamation, and misuse of law enforcement. Over the next few weeks, my life became a blur of legal documents, depositions, and tension. Every morning, I woke to new whispers, neighbors pretending not to stare, HOA members driving slowly by. Some supported me quietly, others avoided me like I was radioactive. It was exhausting. But there were small victories too. The sheriff's office stopped responding to her calls. The county zoning office issued a statement confirming that my property was not within any homeowners association jurisdiction. When that document came in the mail, stamped and signed by the county registrar, I framed it and hung it right beside my front door. Every time I looked at it, it reminded me that the truth was finally catching up to her lies. The court date arrived 6 weeks later. Walking into that courtroom, I felt strangely calm. Karen was already there, sitting at the plaintiff's table in a crisp white blouse, clutching a binder like it contained the 10 Commandments. Her lawyer, a slick man in a navy suit, whispered in her ear. When she saw me, she smirked, like she still believed this was her show. But when the judge called the case and Robert stood up to speak, the tide turned fast. "Your Honor," he said, voice clear and steady, "my client's property lies completely outside the HOA's jurisdiction. We have certified maps, county statements, and law enforcement records proving repeated harassment and false police reports from the plaintiff." He handed the judge a thick folder. Karen's lawyer objected, muttering about technicalities, but the judge wasn't having it. He flipped through the documents, eyebrows raising. Then he looked straight at Karen. "Ma'am, did you, or did you not, enter the defendant's property to place notices and take photographs?" Karen hesitated, eyes darting. "I was performing my duties as HOA president." The judge frowned. "On land you do not govern?" She stammered something unintelligible. Robert handed over the video of her confrontation at my driveway. The courtroom went silent as the screen showed her yelling, "We have rights," and me calmly saying, "It's aimed at my driveway." When the video ended, the judge sighed. Case dismissed. Karen's face went pale. Then the judge added, and I'm granting the defendant's counterclaim for harassment. Mrs. Winters, you and the Lakeview HOA are hereby ordered to cease all contact and pay court costs. For a second, I didn't even breathe. Then it hit me, I'd won. Outside the courthouse, reporters from the local news station were waiting. Apparently, someone had tipped them off about the HOA versus homeowner case. They asked me what message I wanted to send. I said, simple. Freedom means respecting other people's boundaries, not trying to control them. That line ended up on the evening news. By the next morning, my phone was blowing up again, but this time, with support. Messages poured in from all over the country. People wrote things like, "You're my hero, man," and "We've all had a Karen like that." The county even reposted my story on their community rights page. A week later, the sheriff personally dropped by to hand me a copy of the restraining order against Karen. "Hopefully this gives you some peace," he said. It did. For the first time in months, I slept soundly. No more headlights in the driveway, no more fake notices, no more tense mornings. The "Not in HOA" sign still stood in the yard, sun faded now, but proud. Sometimes I'd catch myself staring at it, thinking how something so simple had turned into a battle for dignity. But maybe that's how freedom works. It doesn't show up in grand speeches or parades, it shows up in the small, quiet act of saying no when everyone expects you to say yes. I thought it was over. But I was wrong. Because the story wasn't about to end, it was about to go viral. Paragraph 4. When my story hit the local news, I figured it would be a quick, 15-second curiosity, something folks would talk about over coffee, then forget by the next morning. I was wrong. By the time I woke up the next day, my phone was vibrating non-stop. Texts. Calls. Emails. Even my old high school buddy from Texas had messaged me, "Bro, you're on the front page of Reddit." I blinked at the screen in disbelief. There it was, my face, my sign, and the headline, "Homeowner defeats HOA after being falsely accused of trespassing." The comments were wild. Thousands of strangers were cheering me on. Some called me a legend. Others shared horror stories about HOA bullies who fined them for leaving Christmas lights up too long or for parking a work truck in their own driveway. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like a target, I felt like a symbol. But fame, even the accidental kind, has a cost. That week, I couldn't go anywhere without being recognized. At the grocery store, the cashier grinned and said, "Hey, you're that not in HOA guy." At the gas station, someone asked to take a selfie. It was flattering, for about 2 days. Then came the emails. Dozens of them. Some were from reporters wanting interviews, others from lawyers asking if I'd join a class action against HOA abuse. But mixed in with the good were the bad, fake accounts, threatening messages, and one email that simply said, "Enjoy your 15 minutes. We'll see who laughs last." The sender? LakeviewBoard@communitymail.org. I didn't need to guess who that was. Karen might have lost in court, but she wasn't finished. The next evening, I noticed a post on the Lakeview HOA Facebook page, a long, dramatic statement written by President Karen Winters herself. She called me a disruptive outsider, accused me of harassing community residents for internet fame, and claimed the HOA had been unfairly targeted by misinformation. Her final line made my blood run cold: "We will continue to pursue justice through any means necessary." That wasn't an apology. It was a threat. At first, I tried to ignore it. I went about my days quietly, working on small home projects, fixing my boat motor, repainting the porch railing. But I could feel the tension in the air again. Cars slowed as they passed my house. Some neighbors who used to wave now looked the other way. A few even crossed the street when they saw me walking Max. It was like I'd won the battle but lost the peace. Then, one night, around 11 p.m., I woke to the sound of shattering glass. I jumped out of bed, grabbed the flashlight and ran toward the front of the house. The porch light flickered on automatically, and there it was, the window of my truck, smashed in. On the seat, a brick. Wrapped in paper. My stomach dropped as I unfolded it. In thick red marker, the words, "Move out." For a moment, I just stood there, heart pounding. Not out of fear, but out of a cold, focused anger. I checked my security footage. Sure enough, the camera caught a figure in a hoodie jogging away, but not before a sliver of light reflected off the license plate of a familiar Lexus. I saved the clip, printed stills, and called the sheriff. When Deputy Martinez, the same one who'd helped me before, arrived, he whistled low. "That's serious. You want to press charges?" "Absolutely," I said. "Every last one." He nodded. "We'll handle it. Don't worry." But I knew better than to relax. 2 days later, I got a call from a local news producer asking if I'd be willing to do a full interview, the human story behind the viral man who took on an HOA. I hesitated, then agreed. If Karen wanted to keep twisting the truth, I'd counter her with it, publicly, clearly, and calmly. They came that Saturday afternoon, a small crew with cameras and lights. I stood on my porch, the "Not an HOA" sign proudly behind me, and told the whole story from start to finish, the harassment, the false reports, the smashed truck window. The interview aired that evening. The segment wasn't sensational, it was raw and honest. And it exploded. By the next morning, national outlets picked it up. My phone lit up again, radio shows, podcasts, even a documentary crew from California wanting to feature ordinary Americans standing up to overreach. I couldn't believe it. Then came the email that changed everything. It was from a man named Tom Hargrove, a former HOA board member from Lakeview, the same HOA. His subject line read, "You need to see this." He attached a PDF of internal HOA emails, ones between Karen and the other board members, sent months before our conflict even began. As I scrolled through, my jaw tightened. They'd been planning to expand the HOA boundary illegally to include my land and 2 other lots, without county approval, because, in their words, it will increase HOA value and maintain visual harmony. Visual harmony. Translation, control. Karen had targeted me not because of my sign, but because I'd unknowingly bought the one piece of land that could stop their expansion. I sat there, staring at the emails, my pulse pounding in my ears. Then I forwarded everything to my lawyer, Robert. His response came 5 minutes later, "This is gold. Absolute proof of intent and fraud. I'll contact the county prosecutor immediately." Within days, the county investigation was underway. Inspectors showed up at Lakeview's office, seizing documents and hard drives. It turned out the HOA had been overbilling residents, faking boundary maps, and pocketing maintenance fees for land that didn't even belong to them. It was massive. Karen's perfect suburban empire was crumbling in real time. The local news ran the headline, "Lakeview HOA under investigation for fraud and property misrepresentation." When the reporter mentioned my name, she called me the homeowner whose persistence exposed the truth. I watched the segment in silence, a strange mix of pride and disbelief swirling in my chest. All I had wanted was to be left alone. But somehow, I had uncovered something much bigger, a web of greed, arrogance, and corruption hiding behind manicured lawns and decorative mailboxes. That night, as thunder rolled over the hills, I stood out on the porch, staring at the lake. The rain came down in silver sheets, washing over the sign that started it all. It wasn't just a piece of wood anymore, it was a symbol of a fight I never asked for but couldn't walk away from. Max lay beside me, calm as ever, while lightning flickered across the water. I thought about my father again, a man who'd built his life on honesty, who always told me, "Son, people will test your boundaries, but once you let them move the fence once, they'll move it again and again until you've got nothing left. He'd been right. And I realized that maybe this whole ordeal wasn't just about land or signs or even freedom. It was about dignity. About standing your ground when the world tells you to fold. A few weeks later, Karen finally broke her silence, not in person, but on TV. The same station that had interviewed me ran a segment titled, "Former HOA President Speaks Out Amid Fraud Investigation." I almost didn't watch it, but curiosity won. She sat there, visibly shaken, trying to look composed. "I never intended for things to get this far," she said. "We were simply enforcing community standards." The reporter asked if she regretted targeting me. Karen hesitated, lips trembling. "He embarrassed the association. But I suppose we made mistakes." That was as close to an apology as I'd ever get, and honestly, it was enough. Because she wasn't the one holding power anymore. The community was. After the investigation wrapped up, the county dissolved the Lakeview HOA's charter. Their funds were seized, and the board members banned from holding positions in any homeowners association for 10 years. My neighbors changed after that. The ones who'd once avoided me now waved again. Some even came over to thank me. One older man, Mr. Dawson, stood at my gate one evening and said quietly, "We were afraid of her, you know." Everyone was. She made people believe they couldn't speak up. "You did what we couldn't." That hit hard. All this time, I thought I'd just been fighting for myself. Turns out, I'd been fighting for everyone around me too. The months that followed were calm. Peaceful. I repainted the porch, fixed the dock, planted sunflowers by the fence. The "Not in HOA" sign still stood, weather-beaten and cracked, but I couldn't bring myself to replace it. It had scars, same as me. Some evenings, I'd sit out there with a beer, watching the sun sink behind the hills, and smile as people walking by slowed down to snap a photo of the famous sign. It had become a landmark of sorts, a reminder that sometimes, one act of defiance can ripple far beyond your own front yard. But the story wasn't done. Not yet. Because just when I thought peace had finally settled in, one last letter arrived, this time, from the county itself. And what it said would change everything all over again. Paragraph 5. The letter came in a plain brown envelope with the county seal stamped in blue across the front. No return address, no warning, just my name, printed neatly in black ink. For a second, I thought it might be another tax notice or a routine zoning update. But the paper inside felt heavier than normal, almost waxy, as if it carried more than words. I slid it open with my pocket knife and unfolded it. Notice of property reclassification and ownership adjustment. My heart gave a single hard thump. It went on to explain that, following the Lakeview HOA investigation, the county had reviewed all land parcels affected by fraudulent filings. Mine was one of them. And because my lot had been improperly recorded years earlier, back when the HOA first tried to annex that lakeside strip, the county had discovered that my property line extended 50 yards farther into the lakefront than anyone realized. In plain English, I didn't just own the small sliver of land with my house and dock. I owned the entire western shoreline. I sat down on the porch steps, letter trembling in my hand. For months I'd fought just to keep what was mine. Now, out of nowhere, I'd been handed more than I ever expected, more than anyone else in that community ever had. The irony wasn't lost on me. At first, I didn't know what to do. My lawyer, Robert, called me the next morning. "Congratulations," he said. "That's a hell of a win." "Feels weird calling it a win," I muttered. "I didn't ask for more land." He laughed softly. "That's the universe balancing the scales, my friend. You stood your ground. Now the ground just grew." But as good as it sounded on paper, I knew it would cause another storm. By noon, the news had leaked. A drone photo of the updated property map was circulating online with headlines like, "HOA Nemesis now owns entire lake shore." The meme started within hours. People photoshopped me sitting on a golden throne by the water, wearing sunglasses and holding a "No HOA allowed" flag. I should have found it funny, and part of me did, but deep down I braced for the backlash. Because if there was one thing I'd learned, it was this: power attracts envy. Sure enough, the emails began again, this time from former HOA members, residents, even real estate developers offering to buy part of the shoreline. Some offered generous sums. Others tried to intimidate me with legal talk about community access obligations. I turned them all down. Politely at first. Then firmly. One afternoon, I drove down to the marina to refuel my boat. The air was crisp, the water like glass. A few fishermen nodded as I passed. But near the end of the dock stood a woman I recognized instantly, even without her signature pearl necklace. Karen. Her hair was shorter now, streaked with gray, her posture less rigid. She looked smaller, somehow, like the weight of everything had finally settled on her shoulders. She saw me and sighed. "You won," she said quietly. I leaned on the railing beside her. "Wasn't about winning." "I know," she said. "But you did." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The wind rippled the water, carrying the faint scent of pine and gasoline. Finally, she turned toward me. "I lost everything," she said. "My job, my savings, my reputation. I wanted to feel satisfaction, but instead, I just felt tired." "I didn't want that for you," I said. She gave a brittle laugh. "No, you wanted freedom. I wanted control. We both got what we asked for, and more than we bargained for." She started to walk away, then stopped. "I hope you take care of this place," she said, gesturing to the lake. "It deserves better than people like me." And just like that, she was gone. Over the next few weeks, the quiet returned. The county completed the cleanup of Lakeview's mess, transferring ownerships, clearing fraudulent easements, and refunding overcharged residents. Most of my neighbors began repairing fences, literal and emotional ones. We started having weekend barbecues by the water, laughing about the absurdity of it all. One evening, old Mr. Dawson brought over a hand-carved wooden sign. Burned into the grain were the words, "Freedom Lake, established 2025. He grinned. Figured it needed a new name. We mounted it on the dock that night, the reflection of the letters shimmering across the dark water. But despite the peace, part of me still wrestled with everything that had happened. I'd set out to escape chaos, to live quietly, simply, away from the rules and noise of other people's control. Yet somehow, by refusing to back down, I'd become a symbol in a much larger conversation. Journalists still emailed me. Law schools asked if they could use my case as a study in property rights and overreach. A few even called me the man who defeated the HOA machine. It sounded dramatic, but I never felt like a hero. Just a stubborn man who refused to be bullied. One morning, I sat by the lake with a notebook and started writing everything down, the timeline, the court hearings, the threats, the brick, even that first moment I hammered the sign into the ground. Page after page poured out of me. I didn't know it then, but those notes would later become the backbone of a book. Something honest. Something for every ordinary homeowner who ever felt powerless against the system. The first chapter began with a single sentence: "All I wanted was a little peace and a clear view of the water." I smiled when I wrote it. Because that was the truth. Peace, however, doesn't always come quietly. Sometimes it roars in like thunder, tearing down everything fake until only the real things remain. That's what this lake had become, a mirror of what was left after the storm. One crisp autumn morning, nearly a year after the chaos began, I woke early and walked down to the dock with Max mist clung to the water, and the first rays of sun painted the hills gold. There, half hidden behind cattails, stood the old, "Not in HOA" sign. The paint had peeled, the letters faded, but it still stood tall, stubborn as ever. I ran my fingers over the rough wood and laughed softly. Guess we did all right, huh, boy? Max wagged his tail and leaned against my leg. I left the sign there, not as defiance anymore, but as a monument. A reminder of what happens when you stand your ground. A few months later, I received another letter from the county, this time a formal invitation. They were launching a new community initiative, Independent Property Owners Coalition. They wanted me to serve as a consultant, helping homeowners understand their rights, how to navigate zoning laws, how to avoid being trapped in the kind of nightmare I'd survived. I hesitated for a long time before answering. Then I thought of all the people who'd messaged me over the past year, teachers, veterans, single parents, people who'd been fined, bullied, or threatened by their own associations. People who just wanted to live peacefully. I signed the papers and mailed them back. If my story could help even one of them, it was worth it. The coalition's first meeting was held at the local town hall. When I stepped up to the podium, the crowd surprised me, hundreds of people, some from other states, even a few reporters at the back. I cleared my throat, feeling the weight of all those eyes. I'm not a lawyer, I began. I'm not a politician. I'm just a guy who wanted to hang a sign on his own land and got told he couldn't. But if my story proves anything, it's this: rules mean nothing without truth, and power means nothing without respect. The room went silent. Then someone started clapping. Soon the whole crowd was on their feet. It was surreal. Afterward, an older woman came up to me, tears in her eyes. My HOA tried to evict me for planting wildflowers, she said. Your story gave me courage to fight back. Thank you. I shook her hand and realized that maybe this was what all of it had been leading to, not revenge, not notoriety, but change. As the months rolled on, Freedom Lake became a quiet sanctuary again. Kayakers paddled across the water, kids skipped stones by the dock, and the air smelled of pine and rain. Sometimes, on still evenings, I'd stand at the water's edge, watching the reflection of the sky ripple across my lake, the lake that had once been a battlefield and was now simply home. And every so often, when a neighbor stopped by to talk about property lines or permits, I'd grin and say, I'm happy to help, but remember, I'm not in the HOA. We'd laugh, and the sound would carry across the water like an echo of freedom itself. Years later, when my book finally came out, the first page carried a dedication: for everyone who's been told to back down, stand tall instead. I still live on that same stretch of land, the same porch overlooking the same shining lake. The "Not in HOA" sign has been replaced with a new one, same words, fresh paint, but I keep the original in my workshop, framed behind glass. Because it's more than wood and paint now. It's a piece of history. One last story. Last summer, a young couple moved into the cabin down the road. First week they were there, the husband knocked on my door, smiling. Hey, you're the guy from that HOA thing, right? I chuckled. That's me. He grinned wider. We bought this place because of you. We wanted somewhere free, somewhere we could raise our kids without all the nonsense. I looked past him, saw his wife waving from the truck, a baby seat in the back, sunlight dancing on the water behind them. That moment hit me harder than any headline ever could. Freedom, I realized, isn't loud. It's quiet laughter on a front porch. It's kids splashing in a lake that belongs to no one but the people who love it. It's peace after the storm. That night, as the sun sank low and the cicadas began their chorus, I sat on my porch with Max at my feet. The sky flared gold, then faded into deep blue. Across the lake, a new family's porch light flickered on. The wind carried the faint sound of a hammer tapping wood, someone putting up a mailbox or maybe even a sign. I smiled. Whatever it was, I hoped it stood for the same thing mine always had: freedom, boundaries, and the courage to keep both.